Fingers everywhere. Okay. All right, Gavin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Galen Norwood, Assistant Director for Planning and Building Services. As said, this is an MOU to develop an integrated regional water management plan with the other stakeholders that are listed. This goes back for some years. Basically, in February of 2012, the board delegated to the RCD the authority to apply for a grant with the Department of Water Resources for an IRWMP. The RCD applied and they got the grant, and it took about a year to get actually into a contract, and then they worked to get into a contract with the consultant to prepare, to start preparing the product. This MOU, the intent is to further the development of that plan and to allow the plan to go forward. I want to note that our special counsel, last week we got a memorandum from him regarding some concerns. This is from Jim Curtis regarding the structure of the MOU, so we're presenting that to you. We feel that that should be addressed. We offer two ways to kind of go about doing it. One would be to direct staff to initiate that now, to initiate consideration of the amendments that Mr. Curtis is proposing and work with the other parties to do that. The other would be to enter into the MOU as it is now and then immediately work to start amending it. The reason, if you did that, the reason would be because of the time frames that are in place. The RCD and their consultant, Dire Engineering, they're working to have an IRWMP adopted by August, really, of this year. Winter of this year, of 2014, is the last round of project funding to go after funding for specific projects. And so they're trying to work to have IRWMP adopted by that time. So if you did option 3, it would be kind of in recognition of that timeline. So really, that's all I have. If there's specific questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
I got a question for council. I am a member of the Henry Valley Regional Conservation District. Financial. I don't know if you're doing that.
If you have any economic interest, then you should recuse yourself.
And as you're, I'm sure you know, if you think you feel like there's a conflict,
Yeah.
there probably is.
Well, I mean, the water master budget, which I pay part of, is done by the RCD.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Pyle, for bringing that up.
We'll have a cigar.
And Mr. Chairman, if I
Well,
just
because
may,
I
The
eat
three of you left?
because I eat farm food, and somewhere along the line, I'm sure that there's a
Connection
or
there,
something
too?
might be a connection. Does that excuse me too?
No, I'm afraid not, Mr. Stafford. Good try.
Mr. Chairman, if I just may add a few comments too, that we gave you a couple options because there was concern with the timeline. But my recommendation is number 1, because compressed timelines are never a good reason to do something that may not be optimal. And so I hate to be Director Bummer, and I know that we have timelines that are tight, but you know, I think if you read through Mr. Curtis's memo, that it's sufficient enough to raise enough concern that, you know, we're willing to expedite, and I hope all the other players in this MOU would be too. And I just feel like it's never too late to get it right. So that's the recommendation from staff, even though we give you options.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation as well. I mean, he's a valuable, vast source of knowledge. And if there is time, yeah.
Yeah, he has insight to all kinds of situations in case law that, you know, luckily I'm not having to spend my nights reading.
Can I add one more thing? Sure. Thank you. I just wanted to add that you know, the parties have known here in the last probably 3 or 4 weeks that there's been some issues, and we've been working with council to kind of list those and know what they were. And you know, we have that. They have access to this, and they're aware of it. I have spoken with the engineer for RCD, which is Dire Engineering, and also with the watershed coordinator, who is Tim Kesey. They're both interested in option 3. I just wanted to make sure that I They're not here, but due to their schedules and stuff, but I wanted to make sure I expressed that. But again, the right thing, as Moore says, the right thing to do is to fix the MOU and move forward the right way.
I'm interested to hear what your take on option 4 is. Just to do nothing.
That's,
Because the reason why I say that is that it's just like a couple of weeks ago, we had another groundwater, and it's just the state way of getting in and taking control of all of our water. And, yeah, I mean, we get sucked into, well, you get this grant funds if you do it, and then you get all these rules and regulations and tighter and tighter and tighter, and pretty soon, you've got nothing left, and they have total control of you, and that's part of the reason of what happened up in Altaris, is you get all these people's public trough, and then all of a sudden, boom, they take it away from you, and people go postal. And I think we get sucked into, well, it's the only game in town, that's what we gotta have, we just get sucked into that, and then, there we are. And we've got nothing, and so I'm interested to hear what's gonna happen if we use option 4, and that's to do nothing with it.
well, that's a policy decision of the board. You know, as it stands right now, the direction we have from the board is to pursue this, and, you know, to support the RCB in the application and preparation of the plan. So if that was the policy decision that the board made, then, you know, it may, you know, I don't know offhand everything that it could affect. Certainly it would affect grants with DWR, implementation grants. The county doesn't really have a lot of projects. You know, we're doing, the project you were referring to is CASGEM, is a groundwater monitoring project. That's already funded and already there, so it shouldn't impact that. It could potentially impact other things that we may be eligible for down the road. But off the cuff, I couldn't tell you everything that it might impact.
It goes back to DWR, well, now we have to get these new wells to monitor them, we
Right.
can't go off the old wells, I mean, we're just playing into DWR, this whole thing, and it makes me very nervous, and I don't like it.
That's the policy decision for the board.
And I would just add too that no action would potentially confuse issues further for this process because there is an existing MOU. It just is so nebulous that it's not really a workable MOU, and that's why we had the second, and that's why we looked at the second, didn't like it, and have the third. Not commenting on what you said, I think I say that daily about the state and DWR and a variety of different Department of Conservation people, but if you don't want to play the game, that's one thing, but you're right, this is the only game in town.
But not just that department, there's other departments in the state that are, it's the same type thing, so it is certainly a, you know, it's a board decision to make on which direction they want to head, they want staff to head. So.
Well, personally, I mean, this county was raised on agriculture, and that's what the base of this economy is around here, and I think we're cutting our own throats, in my opinion. I mean, I appreciate what Mr. Curtis put in, and he has a lot of the same thinking, and, you know, I mean, personally, I'm not interested in moving forward with this, I'll tell you right now.
I see Jack's here, and Jack's got a lot of knowledge about this. What's your take on this, Jack?
Oh, geez.
I'm gonna put you on the spot.
My name's Jack Hansen. I'm a resident of Lassen County. Aaron and I could probably have a pretty good discussion on this issue. I see our efforts on our groundwater management plan we did countywide, and our BMOs, basin management objectives, and then even the IRWMP as a way of preempting the state from exerting their control, because as we both know, that you know, through the drought and so on and so forth, there's a lot of movement for statewide groundwater law, which California is one of 7 states that doesn't have a statewide groundwater law. If you have your efforts in place locally, you can preempt the state from taking that authority from you. So on that issue, we could probably debate whether the IRWMP process is a good process. We're not one of the first, we're one of the last. And if you don't have one, the state they may implement their own on you. So I think that's the other side of it. You know, I've been involved in the IRWMP process since the beginning, and it's not just a tool to get grants, although that obviously is the primary goal of probably LIC and the city of Susanville. They both want Prop 84 and Prop 50 grants, I think, are the two that are covered under it. So, but I think the regional water management plan done locally and supported locally is a good thing. So, that'd be my take.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to kind of slow down, I think, and really understand what it is we're buying into. I sat through the city council discussion, and I think there was a fair amount of consternation on the part of the council. They ultimately voted and agreed to go ahead because they were assured by staff and they were assured by the representatives at the podium, you know, speaking in favor of putting this together. But at the same time, you gotta read the fine print. And I think Mr. Curtis raises, and I'm looking on page 3 of his memo, which is 26 of the packet that you have in the second paragraph, in which he's talking about, you know, the structure and the functioning of the RWMG in terms of the entity that would be basically created to do this. Should not include a delegation of authority to the RWMG to adopt the IRWMP, which is akin to a legislative act. You know, if the RWMG is not intended to be structured as an independent public entity, you know, all this, and you need to, you know, the representation is, this is kind of like a formalized working group that's going to put together this document. And when you read what he's saying in here, is that they are then in a position to kind of basically self-actualize. In other words, it's not that they would create the document and then have to take it back to each of the participating entities, legislative bodies to ratify. So the city council would have to ratify on behalf of the city, the work product, the county board of supervisors for the county, the RCD board for the RCD, you know, all the various parties that would be involved. That's one format, and that's kind of what is represented when the presentation's made at the podium. But when you read the paperwork here, it doesn't really do that. And he points out, and the page before that, I believe it was, let's see, no, it's down in the next paragraph down when he's talking about section 6.6.2 and 6.6.3, where it's problematic, as he says, and he just flat out says it's inappropriate. So let's say we buy into this and we appoint you, Larry, to be the representative of our entity, or better yet, let's appoint Maury. Okay, he's not even elected. Better yet. And we appoint Maury, and you know, and then he, you know, he's busy because he's doing everything under the sun, you know, taking care of all kinds of brush fires, and he can't be to half the meetings. So he delegates Galen as his proxy to attend the meeting, and in that's provided for in 6.6.3, where each representative shall promptly designate a proxy for him or her in RWMG affairs and vote on all matters when the representative is not in attendance. The proxy shall serve at the pleasure of the appointing RWMG board. So now we're, you know, so now we've given our proxy basically to Maury. Maury has delegated that through. So now you're like 2 removed from the legislative authority, and yet then they, under this section that we were just talking about above in terms of executing the document that would be prepared, and it's done out of the purview, but it's done in our name and on our behalf, and it representing to us. And he just sees that that whole structure, the way it's set up, is not the way to do it. Now, when we set up the Joint Powers Authority for the pool, JP, for the new pool project, you know, that JPA's got 2 board members, 2 council members, and a public member at large, and their job is to put it together. But ultimately, when it comes down to, especially if there's financing that would be involved, the pool board on its own independently just can't go out and execute bonds and, you know, cut deals with the banks and make the money flow so that the water can flow. They would have to bring back to the respective appointing bodies of the JPA to ratify those kind of agreements. So they don't have, you know, unlimited capacity to function on our behalf. In other words, any sort of binding that would bind upon us as an entity has to be brought back to this board. So the 2 reps we have sitting there can't just go off and do what they want ultimately. In the end, they're our agents. And that's what Mr. Curtis is really talking about here in his memo, just reading just that part of it, not really getting into the nuts and bolts. I mean, right there, the hairs on the back of the neck, I do not feel comfortable supporting this document. And I guess had the city council having the same document in front of them, and we had a chance to look at it while we were flipping through during their meeting, I think that's Exhibit A, shows the city approval of the proposed MOU. I'm surprised the city attorney and city staff didn't zero in on some of that, more importantly, members of the city council, because the concerns they raised and the assurances they were given is just contrary to what you read in these two paragraphs of Mr. Curtis's letter. So I throw that out for what it's worth. I'm with you, Mr. Alba. I think option 4 right now is probably the one I would be inclined to sit on until we could have a more thorough vetting of how this organization is going to function. I'm not saying that maybe we need to do something, you know, because we hear about this water crisis, but most of the water crisis is on the west slope, and they don't live in a drought environment like we do. So we've always had a permanent water crisis because of being on the east side of the mountains. We've learned to live and adapt with, and so the water crisis that they're now all we're hearing about in the news is normal for us. And so anyway,
I think to do that, wouldn't be actually option 4, which is to do nothing, it would be option 2, correct me if I'm wrong.
All right,
Still
well, and
want
I've
to
heard-
take action to
fix it. I'm going to recommend again, because I'm hearing a variation on a theme. Supervisor Alba is saying, let's not move forward, which is potentially one motion. The other is, let's get this MOU right, work with Curtis, if that's the pleasure of the board, and try to expedite it, and so we can hopefully keep the timeframes alive. And I think it's number 2.
Yes. Or what are the ramifications as far as the timing for this grant?
Well,
Is it going to hurt us?
our limiting factor is probably not us getting the MOU done. I think we can, in short order, have Curtis and Ms. Van de Ploeg put something together that we'd be satisfied with. But we are not in control of how quickly the other entities re-adopt the MOU.
Okay,
So we're the last ones on the plate for the one that we don't like. We'll be the first ones on the plate for the corrected one.
So the Indian Rancheria is okay.
everybody signed off with us.
Everybody has signed off but us.
And so there's no danger of losing this grant by delaying it?
No,
2
there
months,
is,
3
there is
months?
absolutely danger. But as I said in my opening remarks, I don't think that's a reason to proceed. I mean, the liability here is, I think,
Yeah, no, I
substantial.
I read that.
So I just, you know, as I said, I'd rather fail in our timelines doing the right thing than proceeding with something that could create liability for Lassen County.
What kind of time frame will it take to rework this?
Well, Galen, I think we can get it done, but
I think so too. You know, there's, first of all, we need to talk to the other parties that are involved and kind of, you know, Maureen has attempted to talk to the city administrator. We haven't been able to. This is really, you know, this level of detail on the concerns is pretty new. It was just, we just got it last week. Although we knew there was some concerns and we were working to itemize what those were. So if the other parties are willing, you know, I think we can work on the MOU. There are things that the RCD could do to keep moving ahead on the grant as well, in terms of, you know, they've already begun preparing chapters or draft chapters in the IRWMP. The consultant and the working group that we have, which includes city, you know, personnel, rancheria, you know, myself, our technician, and others, you know, we could continue to work on it. It's just that the adoption of it or the ratification of it is kind of put on hold while this gets worked out. So I think we can continue to work forward. It's just that you know, the consultant, their gripe would be, well, we don't have a final okay on any of the sections, and so nothing's ever able to be put to bed on it. But I think that's fine. I don't think it necessarily makes it more difficult, but I think you could still work ahead if the other parties and the RCD and everyone was willing to.
You may,
Well, you know, I think what we need to get worked out is, because on page 29 of the packet, and it would be the existing MOU, second page, the one that the board adopted and we signed in 2011, it talks about the non-binding nature. You know, and that, when we got involved in having the discussion and having the working group, the management group, the RWMG, you know, that was to try to put together a product to bring back. But when you get into this proposed document, they're changing the nature and they're moving away from this non-binding setup that we have to one which becomes more onerous and binding. And I think that's the transition that we have to try to get resolved. And it sounds like the other four are all ready to, you know, proceed ahead. And I'm just surprised that they took action without really taking note. I know at the council meeting, the council members were feeling, you know, pressured, and they were feeling, you know, uncomfortable with what was being pushed, because, you know, they don't have a problem being in the non-binding one. I don't think we do either. It's just that when we all of a sudden now turn this group and formalize it into an entity that, you know, takes on a life of its own. And, you know, maybe all fine and good right now with the people involved, but 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, as people cycle in and out, you know, do we have another situation like the RCD or whatever? I mean, we've had, you know, in terms of getting the conflicts that are there, and now all of a sudden they've got the power and they can down on you. And I think that's what Mr. Curtis is trying to wave the flag on. So we've got to get that resolved before we go to the next step. I mean, to sit down and have the discussion, that's great, but, you know, that's the discussion we've got to have first before we work out the other details.
Galen, you indicated, did you say you were trying to work something out with the city, but you've been unable to?
Well, I was saying that this level of detail on the county's concern is pretty new. So we really just became aware of it at this level last week, although the parties knew that the county had concerns about the way the MOU was structured. And so it's pretty new. We have attempted to contact, I've spoken with the RCD and with the engineering firm, but you know, obviously we need to, depending on the board's action, we need to sit down and have another meeting and talk about some of these things, and hopefully start working with Mr. Curtis to develop an MOU that works for everyone.
Be confident you can get it expedited so we don't lose any potential opportunity.
I can't, I'll say the same thing my boss said, which is no, I couldn't commit to that. You know, first of all, I'm not in control of it. This is a grant that the RCD has. They got, you know, around $400,000, $450, whatever it was, from the state to prepare an IRWMP. I'm there because the Board of Supervisors, because you told me that we're concerned about water, we're concerned about groundwater and all these resources, and we want you there, staff, to monitor and keep track of what's going on. So they're in control of putting everything together, of the document. You know, I'm reviewing kind of what's there. The MOU, I don't think the MOU is going to be the limiting factor in terms of having something ready in time to be eligible for this winter for implementation funds.
Okay.
This is a very important document. This has a lot of potential to affect a lot of different things, and so it's very important to have it right. And it may be even more important. It's probably more important to have it right than even getting the funding, because if you have it wrong, then you know that can cause problems too. But I'm hopeful that it can keep moving forward. We can certainly keep talking about the issues at the TAC level, at the staff level. We can keep talking about, you know, the resources, what concerns are, those sorts of things, and then hope that the MOU has put it together that would kind of ratify or set a process for formalizing that plan when the time comes.
Okay, thank you. So, go ahead.
What kind of time frame do we have before the door closes
On
on the grant, on the IWRP?
well, that's not the limiting factor isn't this grant. This grant is already secured for preparation of the plan. You know, what the consultants and the RCD are working against, and those interested, is submittal of applications for implementation funds this coming winter. And so, you know, kind of the self-imposed timeline that the RCD has given is August 1st. They said by August 1st, we want to have it developed, and then that would give, some months after that to get the applications together before winter and for the funding.
That's what LIC wants and the grantors, that's when they want this MOU completed by?
I mean, they're interested in implementation funds, yes. I would say that that's not the only thing. The city has an urban water management plan that kind of plays into this. There are other things. We have a groundwater management plan, as Mr. Hanson was saying. That's our jurisdiction, is groundwater. So there are other things as well, the resource issues. But the funding, yes, is winter of this year.
And if we get this MOU hammered out by August, then I think that would be sufficient time for most people to make their applications.
I don't think timing's that big.
Yeah.
And if I might add, just,
I just wanna make sure that we don't close the door on something that,
when we talked to Mr. Curtis about this, for him to implement his suggestions or to correct his concerns, he gave us a half day to a day
oh,
time frame to get it. Now,
Okay.
that doesn't mean the other parties are going to agree to it, but I
Right.
think if they read his memo, they would agree to it. But we did ask Mr. Curtis to give us a time frame, and that's what he's asking, of course, with advance notice on doing it. Am I right?
I guarantee you would have people on the council at the city level taking notice of what Mr. Curtis is saying.
This was sent. I was just stating again that this was sent to the city, to the administrator, but, we wanted everyone to know that it was out there, and if it's the board's direction, we'll work to try to answer some of these questions.
It didn't filter down, I guarantee you.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Jack?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During this discussion, we probably got a little bit more strategic than just the MOU and the IRWMP, and so I'd make a couple of comments if I could. And one would be to Supervisor Chapman. You are absolutely right that the Central Valley, most specifically the San Joaquin Valley, because of subsidence and a lot of well drilling going on down there right now, they are keenly aware of the issue, and they do want statewide control. The problem is, yes, we're in a drought, but that statewide control, we just happen to be inside the boundary. And so I think that a lot of these efforts, whether they be the IRWMP or the BMOs and the basin management objectives and the plans and so on that we're doing, I would agree with Eric. There's some danger to it, absolutely. But the danger to not doing it is to eventually have statewide law, control, restrictions, regulations, and so on implemented at our local level. So we're trying to grandfather in existing use, protect those that use that resource right now that live here. And we're trying to, if we can, at least mitigate, if not preempt, any kind of statewide control. So this is done with Farm Bureau's knowledge and Cattlemen's knowledge, and we have this, Aaron, you know it, we have this debate at all our statewide associations on how far we want to buy into some of this process. It'd be much easier just to go home and use the water and not worry about it, but we've seen the state of California slowly creep into this area, so those are my comments. Thank you.
Well, maybe the state will, because we live basically in a continuous state of drought. We've never
I agree
had
with
that. We've never had the
In the state of Jefferson on top of that,
Yeah. We've never had.
which you haven't recognized
Yeah,
yet, I guess.
we've well, we did back in 1992.
I know, but not during this current.
The county actually voted in 1992. If you go back and look,
Yeah.
the state of Jefferson concept was approved by the voters in Lassen County. So we're already like 20 years ahead of everybody.
You were
Right.
way in the beginning, yes.
But in terms of the water conditions, I mean, the West Slope has always enjoyed an abundance
Absolutely.
of water, that falls from the sky, and the East Slope has always been in a starvation mode. Now, I'm not saying we don't have water.
I'm painfully aware of that.
And we have maximized the use and our ability to use that water. So in terms of, obviously, when they now experience on the West Slope, what we've always enjoyed on the East Slope in terms of the drought, obviously they're going to react or overreact, and whatever sort of regulatory authority and power that they bring to bear to deal with their newfound situation could very well be imposed on us and aggravate what we've long ago become accustomed to what they need to do, I mean, it would be, the ideal thing would be for them to learn the lessons of how to do it based upon what our experiences have been, because we're always in that mode. We've never had an abundance on this site, and that's, I think maybe that's what our IRMP does in terms of probably trying to quantify it, and at least grandfather us in so that we're not subjected to their whims, which we oftentimes are. But if we're gonna do that, we need to create the model, and do it right, like I think Galen said.
I
very
appreciate
well.
Mr. Curtis